Somebody in this room needs to hear me today because you walked in carrying a weight you didn't tell anybody about. You've been praying, you've been pushing, you've been holding on by the thinnest thread, and the enemy has been whispering in your ear that it's over. But I came to break that lie today. I came to tell you that the same God who started a work in you is still working on you. Don't you dare quit now. You're in the middle of a masterpiece, and the author has not put his pen down. You might be tired, you might be frustrated, but you are not finished. If God is still working, then you still have a reason to stand, a reason to fight, and a reason to believe again. When we say God's silence is not God's absence, we're dealing with one of the most confusing places in the walk of faith, the moments when heaven feels quiet, prayers seem to echo back empty, and you are left wondering if God somehow stepped away from your situation. And if you're honest, those seasons don't just test your patience, they test your identity, your confidence, your sense of direction. Because nothing will rattle a believer like praying faithfully and hearing absolutely nothing in return. But here's the thing most of us forget. In the heat of that frustration, silence is a language. It's just not the one we prefer. A lot of us equate noise with action. We think if God is speaking, if God is moving, if doors are opening and signs are flashing, then that's proof he's with us. But anybody can stand strong when the burning bush is talking or the Red Sea is parting. Real faith, mature faith, the kind that grows roots deep enough to survive storms, that faith is forged in the quiet. God gets silent. He isn't stepping back. He's pulling you deeper. He's teaching you to trust what he said before over what you feel right now, because your feelings will change. But his word doesn't wobble. Think about it. Every major figure in Scripture had a season where God seemed quiet. Moses had the wilderness. Joseph had the prison. David had the caves. Jesus himself had the silence of Saturday between the crucifixion and the resurrection. Arguably the most confusing pause in the entire story of redemption. But in every case, silence wasn't abandonment, it was preparation. God wasn't gone. He was working behind the scenes, rearranging pieces, maturing hearts, building strength, and setting the stage for what was coming next. That's the same thing he does with us. The silence you feel might actually be God trusting you with a deeper level of growth. Because hear me, God doesn't waste silence. There are things he can only develop in the dark, like character, discernment, endurance, self-control, humility. You can't microwave those things with constant instruction and reassurance. Sometimes he steps back, not because he's leaving, but because he wants to see you use what he already placed inside you. It's like a teacher who stops talking during the test, not to punish you, but because the test is where you show what you've learned. And let's be real, sometimes we misread silence because we're expecting answers in a specific form. You're waiting for a yes or a no, but God is trying to develop a you who can handle either outcome. You want an explanation, but God wants transformation. You want clarity, but God is building capacity. His silence might be stretching you, forcing you to lean on his character instead of demanding a play-by-play of his plan. Because if all you trust is what you can hear or see, you're not walking by faith, you're walking by confirmation. There's also another angle people forget. Sometimes God's silence is actually him speaking through circumstances, through timing, through your own spirit. You're so focused on the lack of sound that you miss the movement. You wanted a voice, but he gave you peace. You wanted a sign, but he closed a door you were too afraid to shut. You wanted a miracle, but he sent a person. Silence is rarely empty. You just have to tune your ear to a different frequency. And maybe, just maybe, the silence is protecting you. If God responded every time we demanded it, he'd be catering to our panic instead of shaping our destiny. Sometimes the quiet keeps us from rushing ahead or attaching ourselves to the wrong thing. Sometimes the quiet forces us to slow down, breathe, and let God catch us up to what he's preparing. So if you're in a silent season right now, don't panic. Don't assume he's done with you. Don't assume he's forgotten you. You are not abandoned. You are being developed. You're in the darkroom season, where negatives turn into images, where blurred pieces come into clarity, where the picture is formed before it's revealed. Silence is simply the space where God does his most careful work. Hold steady. Praying. Keep standing. Keep trusting, even when your emotions scream the opposite. Because the silence you're surviving today is building the strength you'll need for the blessing coming tomorrow. And when that moment arrives, and it will, you'll look back and realize God wasn't quiet, he was crafting. He wasn't absent. He was closer than ever. You just couldn't hear him over the sound of your own worry. There are moments in life when you pray with everything in you, and the only thing you seem to hear back is nothing. You reach for God, and all you get is the quiet. And let's be honest, silence can feel like rejection if you're already tired, stretched thin, or trying to hold yourself together by a thread. You start asking questions you don't want to say out loud. Did I mess up? Did God change his mind? Is he ignoring me? Did I miss something? But here's the truth that cuts right through the confusion. God's silence is not God's absence. Just because you can't hear him right now doesn't mean he isn't right in the middle of what concerns you. Think about how much our minds depend on sound. We equate noise with activity and movement. If someone's talking, teaching, directing, responding, then we assume everything is okay. But silence can feel like abandonment. Silence feels like you're stranded. But in God's world, silence is often the opposite. It's the space where he does his most delicate, intricate, and transformational work. It's not the void where he disappears. It's the workshop where he shapes you into someone who can carry what you've been asking for. Sometimes God gets quiet because he already gave you what you needed to move forward, but you keep waiting for him to repeat what he's already spoken. Other times he's silent because the next step requires trust, not instructions. Faith that only works when God is talking isn't faith, it's dependency. Anybody can believe when they feel guided every second, but real spiritual maturity grows when you keep walking even when the map isn't talking back. When a teacher gives a test, they don't stand over your shoulder whispering every answer. Not because they're distant, not because they don't care, but because they want to see if you've grown. God isn't grading you like a harsh examiner, but he does allow moments where your faith has to breathe on its own. Not to break you, but to build you. Silence is often a sign that something is being tested, refined, strengthened, or aligned, whether you ask for that growth or not. And don't forget the biblical pattern either. God was silent when Joseph sat in prison, but he was positioning Joseph for promotion. God was silent when Esther faced danger, but he was setting the stage for deliverance. God was silent during the years between David's anointing and David's crowning, but he was developing the kind of king who wouldn't crumble under pressure. Silence has never been the same thing as absence. If God ever truly left you, you wouldn't be able to breathe, think, hope, or stand. The very fact that you're still here is proof he hasn't gone anywhere. Sometimes God's silence is him protecting you from noise that would pull you off course. If he told you every detail of his plan, you'd probably sprint ahead, overcommit, or sabotage yourself by running before you're ready. Some blessings require a season of quiet preparation. Some breakthroughs are built in places where you don't hear anything. The soil doesn't make noise when a seed is growing, but that doesn't mean the seed is dead. The silence is the sign that something hidden is taking root. And when God lets life go quiet, it's usually because roots are forming somewhere inside you. Stronger, deeper, steadier than before. You also have to remember that God's voice doesn't always come as sound. Sometimes his silence pushes you to notice other signals. Peace you didn't expect. A door that closes at just the right time. A relationship that drifts away for your protection. an opportunity that shows up out of nowhere. Silence can redirect you. Silence can slow you down long enough to see what your anxiety used to blur. Silence can keep you from forcing something that would have fallen apart anyway. And sometimes God's silence is simply Him trusting you more than you trust yourself. Trusting that you heard Him the last time, trusting that you have enough wisdom to take the next step, trusting that the faith He's grown in you is strong enough to keep walking even when the path feels dim. So don't let the quiet fool you. Don't assume the worst. Don't turn silence into a scary story your mind makes up. God is closer than the breath in your lungs. He's in the stillness, in the waiting, in the space where you haven't seen the answer yet. Silence is not the sound of Him leaving. It's the sound of Him working. And when He finally breaks the silence, you'll realize He never left you for a second. Most of the things that really change us don't show up wrapped in comfort. We like to imagine growth as this peaceful, glowing, inspirational moment where everything makes sense and our hearts feel lifted and our spirits feel steady. But the truth is, growth usually shows up looking like inconvenience. It shows up as pressure. It shows up as a situation you didn't ask for, a challenge you didn't plan, a shift you didn't see coming. And because it doesn't look glamorous, because it doesn't feel good, because it stretches you in ways you never prepared for, you start thinking something is wrong. But what if the pressure isn't a punishment? What if the discomfort is actually the doorway to the version of you you've been praying to become? Discomfort has a way of pushing us emotionally, spiritually, and mentally into places we wouldn't walk into voluntarily. Nobody wakes up and says, Lord, please give me a problem big enough to force me to grow. We want growth without stretching, progress without friction, elevation without disruption. But that's not how transformation works. A seed has to crack before anything living comes out of it. Muscles have to tear before they get stronger. Gold has to be placed in fire before it becomes pure. Everything that grows goes through tension. Even nature can't escape it. So why would we think we can? Sometimes God lets discomfort touch your life because He knows you'd stay stuck if everything stayed easy. You'd cling to the familiar, even when the familiar is slowly shrinking you. You'd settle for routines that feel safe but don't lead anywhere. Discomfort is the alarm clock for your destiny. It shakes you awake, pushes you forward, and forces you to stretch into places your comfort zone would never allow you to explore. It's not pleasant, but it's purposeful. Think about the times in your life when you actually changed, really changed. Was it when everything was convenient? Probably not. Most of the breakthroughs that shape us only happen because something got hard enough that staying the same no longer worked. Pain forces reflection. Pressure demands action. Discomfort interrupts the autopilot mode we love to live in and makes us pay attention. It makes us ask questions we avoided, confront truths we buried, and step into roles we didn't think we were ready for. And here's the part we don't always see clearly. Discomfort is often the evidence that something new is growing. Not dying, growing. The enemy of growth isn't pain, it's numbness. When life gets uncomfortable, at least you know things are shifting. At least there's movement. At least there's stirring. At least God is stretching something in you that's waking up. Sometimes growth hides inside loss. You lose a job and suddenly you start discovering abilities you forgot you had. You lose a relationship and all at once you see how much of yourself you poured out in ways that weren't healthy. You lose stability and you learn resilience you didn't know you possessed. Discomfort forces discovery. It peels back layers, strips away illusions, and exposes potential that comfort covered up. And let's be real. Discomfort also reveals things about us, our habits, our fears, our insecurities that we don't want to see. But the things God exposes, He exposes to heal. The things He disrupts to rebuild. The things He stretches to strengthen. Growth hurts because breaking patterns hurts. Growth feels messy because becoming someone better means letting go of who you used to be. But here's the good news. Discomfort is temporary while growth lasts. That stretching season doesn't last forever. The pressure doesn't crush you. It shapes you. What feels like chaos now might be clarity later. What feels like disruption now might be direction later. What hurts today may be the very thing that equips you for what you've been asking God for tomorrow. You might not see it yet, and you might not feel it yet, but everything uncomfortable in your life might be working for you, not against you. The doors that close, the shifts you didn't expect, the responsibilities that scare you, the environments that make you feel small, they might be the places where God is teaching you to expand, to trust, to rise, to level up. So don't run from discomfort. Don't assume it means God has stepped away. Sometimes the discomfort is the clearest sign that He's right there with you, stretching your capacity for what He's preparing to bring into your life next. Growth rarely announces itself with comfort. It usually disguises itself as something that feels like pressure. But if you stay steady, if you don't panic, if you let God finish what He started, you'll look back and realize that discomfort wasn't the enemy, it was the catalyst. One of the hardest things to accept in the journey of faith is waiting. Not just the ordinary, everyday waiting, but the kind that stretches you so thin you start questioning everything you believed. That kind of waiting makes you wonder if God heard you, if heaven forgot you, if you misread the signs or asked for something you were never meant to have. When you prayed, planned, prepared, and hoped, and still nothing moves, it's easy to mistake the delay as a divine no. But just because God hasn't delivered something yet doesn't mean He denied it. Delay and denial are not the same thing, even though they feel painfully similar when you're in the middle of it. Delay is often the space where God does His most important work. There are things you're asking for that require timing to be right, not just from your perspective, but from God's. We tend to think that if we're ready, that's enough. But sometimes God is aligning people, resources, opportunities, and circumstances you can't see. You might be prepared for the blessing, but the environment around you may not be prepared to hold it yet. Or you may think you're ready, but God knows there's still something in you that needs refining so the blessing doesn't break you when it finally shows up. Sometimes the delay is God protecting you. If He gave you some things too early, they wouldn't bless you, they'd overwhelm you. A promotion too soon can crush you. A relationship before healing can drain you. A responsibility before development can collapse you. God's delays are often disguised forms of mercy. You think you're waiting on Him, but He might actually be shielding you until the right moment arrives. He isn't saying no, He's saying not yet, because I love you too much to watch you mishandle what you prayed for. Delay also reveals your heart. It exposes whether your faith is conditional or deep-rooted. Anyone can believe God when the answer comes immediately. Anyone can keep a good attitude when they don't have to wait long. But the real test is whether you can trust God when the timeline stretches far beyond your expectations. Delay forces you to confront your motives. Are you seeking God for who He is or just for what He can give? Are you committed to the process or only the outcome? Are you willing to keep walking even when the path grows long and the promise feels distant? Here's the beautiful part. Delay doesn't weaken the promise. It actually strengthens it. The longer something is carried, the more value it tends to gain. The longer a seed stays underground, the stronger its roots become. The longer a story takes to unfold, the richer the ending. God isn't stalling, He's perfecting. He's not dragging His feet. He's crafting something that will make sense when the timing finally converges. And think about this. If God were really denying your request, He would close the door completely. He'd remove the desire, redirect your heart, or shift your path. But the fact that the desire is still alive in you, the fact that you still feel that pull, that hope, that vision, that might be the sign that the promise is still active. You're not waiting for something dead. You're waiting for something developing. There's also a version of you that will only emerge through delay. Patience is one of those qualities nobody gets without waiting. Strength is something you don't discover until you're stretched. Trust isn't built when life is smooth. It's built when nothing moves, and you still believe anyway. Delay produces maturity, resilience, and clarity. It trims away impatience, ego, and entitlement. It teaches you how to celebrate others without feeling threatened, how to remain grounded when you're overlooked, and how to keep believing when nothing around you changes. The enemy loves to whisper during delay. He'll tell you you're forgotten, overlooked, passed by. He'll tell you that other people's blessings mean you've been disqualified. He'll tell you God is ignoring you or punishing you. But none of those things are true. Delay is not a sign of abandonment. It's a sign of process. It means God is working, even if the surface seems still. When the answer finally comes, when the door opens, the opportunity unfolds, the breakthrough breaks through. You'll see why the delay mattered. You'll understand what the waiting shaped in you. You'll realize the timing was perfect in ways you could have never predicted. And you'll be grateful God didn't give you a rushed version of what He intended for you to have in fullness. Delay doesn't mean denial. It means development. It means protection. It means preparation. It means God is committed to giving you the best version of what you ask for, not the fastest one. Keep steady. Keep believing. What's delayed is not denied. It's just being perfected behind the scenes. There comes a moment in every person's life where the weight becomes too much. The pressure closes in from every side. And you feel like you're standing at the very edge of what your heart, your faith, your strength can handle. That moment, the one where you're exhausted, frustrated, overwhelmed, and barely holding yourself together, feels like the end. It feels like the place where something inside you snaps, where hope drains out, where you start thinking, I can't take one more thing. That's the breaking point. And it's one of the most misunderstood places in the human experience. Because we think reaching that point means we've failed, or that God has abandoned us, or that we've run out of options. But what we don't realize is that the breaking point is often the exact doorway to breakthrough. The moment everything inside you feels like it's falling apart might actually be the moment everything is secretly falling into place. A breaking point is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign you've reached the boundary of your old self. You're not breaking because you're defeated. You're breaking because you're transforming. Something in you is stretching beyond what you've known, beyond who you've been, beyond what you've settled for. The pressure you feel isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to push you into a version of yourself you couldn't step into voluntarily. Sometimes the only way God can shift you is by allowing you to come to the end of what no longer fits. You're not breaking down, you're breaking open. When you reach the breaking point, your clarity changes. Suddenly, you start seeing what matters and what doesn't. You start realizing what you've been carrying that wasn't yours, what you've been tolerating that wasn't healthy, what you've been holding on to that has been draining you. Breaking points peel back the illusions. They strip away the distractions. They expose the truth about your situation, your relationships, your patterns, and your inner strength. Pain has a way of making things crystal clear. It teaches you what you can't learn in comfort. And here's something wild. Many breakthroughs don't come while you're strong and confident. They come when you're fragile, tired, and ready to quit. Because it's in those moments that your pride falls off. Ego quiets down. Your self-sufficiency dissolves. You stop pretending you have everything under control. And when all the noise inside you finally breaks, that's when God can speak to you in a way you can actually hear. Sometimes the breaking point is the only place quiet enough for divine direction to reach you. Think about how breakthroughs work in nature. A seed has to break to release life. A butterfly has to struggle to break out of the cocoon, or its wings will never strengthen enough to fly. Even dawn breaks before light appears. Breaking is part of the process. Nothing new emerges without something old giving way. So when you feel like you're shattering, it might be that God is cracking open the shell of your old season so the new one can begin. Your breaking point reveals hidden strength you didn't know you had. You don't discover resilience on the good days. You find it when everything goes sideways, and yet you keep breathing, keep moving, keep fighting for something inside you that refuses to die. You realize you're stronger than the storm you're facing, because if the storm could have taken you out, you wouldn't be here. And sometimes the breakthrough is simply realizing that what you thought would destroy you actually awakened a part of you that was asleep. Breakthroughs rarely happen in the easy moments. They come after the tears, after the confusion, after the nights you prayed with no words left, after the times you almost walked away from everything. Breakthrough comes when you choose to stand in a moment where your emotions are screaming, quit, but something deeper in you says, hold on. That's the turning point. That's where heaven leans in. That's where strength replaces fear, clarity replaces chaos, and purpose rises out of the pain. And here's the beauty. You don't have to feel strong for a breakthrough to happen. You just have to stay present. You can be trembling, you can be exhausted, you can be unsure. Breakthrough doesn't require perfection, it just requires you to not walk away from the moment where God is trying to do something new. So if you feel like you're at your breaking point right now, don't assume it's the end. It might be the moment just before things shift. Your breaking point can become your breakthrough point. What feels like collapse might actually be birth. What feels like losing control might be God taking control. What feels like falling apart might be the exact place where the light gets in. Hold on, something is forming through the breaking. And on the other side of this pressure is a version of you you've never met, but desperately needed. There's something powerful about realizing that as long as God is still moving in your life, still protecting you, still waking you up in the morning, still giving you breath, you are not done. Your purpose isn't expired. Your story hasn't reached its ending. You might feel stuck, tired, confused, or unsure of what comes next, but purpose doesn't disappear just because you can't see the next chapter. God doesn't keep sustaining what He's finished with. If He's still working on you, it's because He still intends to work through you. A lot of people assume their purpose is connected only to success, excitement, or big accomplishments, but purpose is bigger than moments. It's woven into your existence. You don't earn it. You don't create it. You don't upgrade it by doing everything right. And you don't cancel it by making mistakes. Purpose is something God builds into you from the beginning. Quietly, intentionally, sometimes mysteriously. And the very fact that you are still here means that something in you is still needed on this planet. Someone needs your voice, your presence, your experience, your kindness, your creativity, your perspective, your story. Whether you feel qualified or not, sometimes life gets so heavy that you start questioning if anything you do matters. Maybe your plans fell apart. Maybe your heart broke. Maybe you lost something important. Maybe you took a hit you didn't see coming. And in those moments, you start wondering if purpose still applies to you or if God moved on to someone more capable. But hear this, purpose doesn't vanish because you struggle. Some of the most meaningful purpose emerges because you struggled. God often uses the places where you hurt the most to give you compassion, strength, and authority you never would have gained otherwise. And even when it feels like nothing is happening, God is working behind the scenes in ways you can't imagine. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean there isn't progress. Purpose doesn't always show up as fireworks. It often shows up as survival, persistence, healing, and quiet transformation. God's work in you is often slow, steady, and invisible until suddenly it isn't. You think you're standing still, but God is shaping you in ways you'll only understand later. There's also this truth people don't talk about enough. Purpose is not a single moment. It's not one career, one achievement, one relationship, one dream. Purpose evolves as you evolve. It stretches as you grow. It shifts as life shifts. Every season of your life holds a piece of purpose, but not always in the way you expect. There were years you thought were wasted, but what if they were actually foundational? What if God used the pain, the mistakes, the closed doors, and the detours as material to build your future? If God were done with you, you wouldn't still feel that tug inside, the nudge to keep going, the whisper of hope, the ache for something more. Purpose doesn't leave quietly. It keeps nudging you even when you're discouraged. And that tug inside you is proof God is still working. He's not finished shaping your heart, healing your wounds, strengthening your character, sharpening your gifts, or positioning you for what comes next. Some days, purpose looks loud and obvious. Other days, it's as simple as choosing to get up, choosing to care, choosing to keep trying even when you feel worn out. Purpose shows up in every act of love, every moment of courage, every decision to rise when life knocks you down. It shows up in the way you comfort people, the way you push forward, the way you keep believing even with tears in your eyes. And here's the thing. You don't have to understand your purpose fully for it to be real. You don't have to feel confident about it. You don't need a blueprint or a 5-year plan. All you need is the willingness to say, God, if you're still working, then I'm still available. Because when God is at work, nothing in your life is wasted. Even the broken pieces become building blocks. Even the setbacks become setups. Even the seasons that felt empty can become the very soil where something powerful grows. If God is still working, then your life is still meaningful. You're still needed. You're still becoming. You're still destined for impact in ways you can't see yet. Don't count yourself out when God has already counted you in. As long as He hasn't stopped working, your purpose is still alive, waiting to unfold one step, one season, one miracle at a time. You've walked with me through every truth today, through silence, through stretching, through waiting, through breaking, through becoming. And if there's one thing I want you to carry out of this moment, it's this. God is still working on you. Not a finished chapter. You are a work in progress in the hands of a perfect author. Nothing you face, nothing you fought, nothing you've survived has disqualified you from your destiny. If heaven has been quiet, He's still present. If life has been uncomfortable, He's still shaping. If the promise feels delayed, He's still aligning. If you've been close to breaking, He's still building. And if you're still breathing, He's still calling you into purpose. Don't you dare quit now. Don't let the enemy convince you that this is the end of your story. Don't let your feelings tell you God has stopped moving. You are standing in the middle of something sacred. You just haven't seen the full picture yet. You're standing in the hallway of not yet. But the door is forming. The breakthrough is warming. The promise is unfolding. What God began in you, He is faithful to finish. Not halfway, not partially, fully. So lift your head, straighten your shoulders. Wipe your tears if you need to, but don't throw away your hope. The same God who carried you this far intends to carry you all the way through. You may not feel strong, but God is. You may not see the way, but God does. You may not understand the season, but God has already written the ending, and it ends in victory.